Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Colts Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back with another one, guys. Well, the Indianapolis Colts have now interviewed 5 different guys for their defensive coordinator position, and we are going to talk about each and every one of them. We've kind of done a little bit of a reaction on each and every one on our Reacts channel, so guys, be sure to go check those out over there. Help us get to 2,000 subs over there. But without further ado, we are going to talk about these 5 candidates that the Colts have brought in or will plan to bring in this week for that position and rank them from our least favorite to our favorites. So, Derek, let's just start right in. Let's start with all the candidates. Just want to name all the candidates the Colts have brought in right now. And I'm going to do it just alphabetical order just because I'm weird like that. But we'll start with Dennis Allen is the first name, Ephraim Banda, the next name, Lou Anarumo, Steve Wilks, and then we found out on Tuesday, Wink Martindale is the latest coach the Indianapolis Colts will be bringing in. So, Derek, some of these guys, have been defensive coordinators before. Some of them have been head coaches before. Some of them have just not even been a defensive coordinator, have been, secondary coaches. But I will say this right off the top. The thing that you notice here, Derek, is number one, there's a big focus on the defensive backs. I mean, pretty much I think 4 of the 5 candidates have worked with defensive backs or specialized with defensive backs. And then number 2, Derek, you notice 4 of the 5 candidates the Colts have brought in are what you would consider veteran coaches in this league. They have been defensive coordinators for a long time. It's not like they've are new guys that are position coaches that now are potentially looking. I mean, one guy is, but the majority of these 5 candidates have had experience and have had success as well. So you've not just guys that have been around for a long time and have posted some bad defenses, but some guys that legitimately have posted some defenses that are top 10 type of units in years past. So with that being said, Derek, what are your thoughts just on these 5 candidates here before we kind of get into our ranking and your opinion on the 5 guys the Colts have brought in so far?
Yeah, definitely a lot of good names on this one. And like you mentioned before, definitely an emphasis on trying to better use out of your secondary. And, a bunch of guys too that have been, and a bunch of names that have been around the league for a while. It's a couple guys that aren't, but there's quite a few names here that are very well respected names, guys that know what they're doing, guys that are obviously trying to find their next spot wherever they end up. So, yeah, I'm definitely intrigued by some of these. There's a couple more names that I hope that the Colts might keep an eye out for as we continue, but definitely a good start of names here.
Yeah, and also one thing I would add as well, Derek, it definitely seems like the Colts got sick and tired of watching, opposing offenses kind of slice and dice their way down the field, kind of like I've said it before, but the death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's like the short passes, the quick 3-second releases where, you can't get pressure on the quarterback because you're just letting stuff wide open. It's very evident to me that the Colts saw that and they're saying, we are going to go, well, the candidates we're going to look for are going to be the polar opposite of what we've been doing the last 3 years on defense. So that is very interesting as well. And a lot of these guys are really, I would say, more of the aggressive type, guys that are not just going to react, but are more of those attacking defensive coordinators, right? And that kind of lines up with how the Colts offense and Shane Steichen runs things, where it is more of, hey, we're going to make you kind of have to outthink us and make you have to react to what we want to do on offense. So that's definitely a positive there. But Derek, when talking about the guys out of the 5, probably the guy that I think we both would agree right now, probably simply because we just don't know a lot about him. The guy that comes in at last right now that we have is Ephraim Banda. And I mean, a guy that, number one, Derek, out of the 5 candidates, probably the guy that you would say is the least qualified just because He doesn't have as wide of a resume. He doesn't have a history as a defensive coordinator. And yes, he does focus on the defensive backs, but compared to these four other candidates, Derek, it kind of seems like he's a guy that maybe isn't as qualified to be a defensive coordinator right now compared to these four guys who have had some success. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no doubt. The coaching history is just not there very much. And, I mean, that's not to say that, he needs to be disqualified from anything. There's lots of guys that'll take chances on guys that, didn't get everybody was a defensive coordinator their first time. It just took that one team to finally fall in love with what you had. Right. But, for the most part, outside of, these last two seasons, with the Cleveland Browns, these are the only two seasons that Banda's even been in the NFL. So he spent most of his time at the collegiate level. And, maybe that is something that the Colts want to take advantage of. I mean, we obviously saw them going that route with the defensive line coach from Pitt this last season. Maybe that is something that they want to try to do moving forward. I'm not sure, but like you said, just the coaching tree isn't as long for Mando right now. So maybe there's just a lot less that we know about him right now. And, that can be very true. But who knows? Maybe they want the new fresh blood in there. And you certainly can't say he hasn't done his job well with the Cleveland Browns the last two seasons in the secondary, though.
Well, I'm also thinking, Derek, you look at the other four candidates, and that screams like, hey, we need a guy in here who's going to be like a hard-nosed type of guy that's been proven, especially with kind of what we expect with Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen being on the hot seat. I would think that they would go with more of a proven guy, and Banda just frankly isn't that. He may end up being a great defensive coordinator one day, but we just don't know at this point, which is why I think where the Colts currently stand, he is the last guy on the list because of the unknown. But who's to say? I mean, we don't really know right now, but I think where the Colts currently are as a franchise, it would probably make the least sense out of any of the guys here. So that's kind of why I would go there. But Derek, talk about your number four, because we start, I think, from we agree on number one, but from 4 to 2, we have some disagreement. So curious your number four and your reasoning for that.
Yeah, Steve Wilks is my number four. I just think that from Steve Wilks's perspective, again, the coaching history of Steve Wilks is long. I mean, holy cow, long. No doubt is, probably has the longest resume of everyone that the Indianapolis Colts would, take a chance on going after. A lot of his most recent stints were with the Carolina Panthers. He spent a lot of time there within the last decade. Had a short tenure with the Cleveland Browns in 2019. Was a defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers in 2023. So, Steve Wilks has been around a bunch of teams with a lot of good defenses. No doubt about it. Just never really been a guy that is stuck in either one of those positions for very long. So that kind of gives me a little bit of cause for concern. I just wonder if it came down to, the teams knew the personnel that they had and they knew that it was good and that Steve was maybe just doing something that they just didn't like. Maybe that was part of the reason as to why. Not 100% sure. But yeah, Steve Wilks, again, resume is there. He's definitely well respected amongst the league. No question about it. I just think, you could get some other guys that have a little bit more of an aggressive nature and guys that have a little bit stronger resumes in reference to their work.
Well, okay. So, and that's, I think, talking about the resume, that's probably why I have Lou Anarumo. While he does have a pretty good resume as well, that's why I have him at number 4. I think part of the reason for that, Derek, is because Steve Wilks has had head coaching experience. So I do think for me that is a little bit more enticing to have a guy that has had that. And, it's certainly proved that he can be capable of having one of the top units. I mean, look what he did with San Francisco in 2023. I mean, and then look what happened this last year. I mean, Steve Wilks to me, Derek, is a guy that I think definitely, while yes, it probably wouldn't be the most splashy hire, I do think that he would be solid enough. While Lou Anarumo, like I just watched and I understand there was some personnel issues as well, but Derek, for me, it's like I don't know if I want to go back to a defensive coordinator whose defense struggled a year ago. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of part of it too, is like I think he's a fine coach. Don't get me wrong. And I personally may be fine with any of the top four. But I think for me, based off of the lack of results a year ago in the Bengals defense, I mean, let's be honest, Derek, the Bengals defense was a large reason why they missed the playoffs. So for me, it's like, you fire a guy who struggled with a defense, and then you're bringing in another guy who came from a struggling defense. And look, I know that they turned it around a little bit in the second half, but Derek, it was bad to start the season. It was bad.
No doubt. No doubt. They had their own issues. And I mean, it's crazy too, because you had NFL sack leader on that defense too, which again just goes to show like just how in the world did this defense possibly, go as bad as that. Yeah, it's definitely crazy.
Yeah. So that for me, I kind of look at that and I say, yeah, I know he had, a couple moments, but to me, with the head coaching experience and kind of the proven track record for Steve Wilks, again, some guys, Derek, and we'll get into this talking about some other candidates here. Some guys, in my opinion, they're not great head coaches, but they are really good coordinators. And I do think Steve Wilks would be that type of guy a little bit more. So that's why I would put him, and sorry, I gave away my 4 and my 3 there, but that's why I would have him above Anarumo. So Anarumo at 4 and then Wilks at 3. But tell me your 3 here. Who would that be for you?
Number 3 for me is going to be Wink Martindale. Again, a long coaching situation for Wink Martindale. And, you just kind of look back at some of his, most recent experience within the last 15 years or so. Again, was a defensive coordinator in 4 different places. Defensive coordinator with the Broncos, defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. We saw how that was working out for them. The New York Giants for that long while. They had a really good defense going for them. And then obviously just became the defensive coordinator for Michigan this last year. And again, say whatever you will about Michigan. They were a pretty solid defense nonetheless for what they had to deal with.
Number 11 in the country, I'm pretty sure.
So, it was, I think in the last 10 years, you have seen Wink Martindale have some really good places, some pretty good spots, and and their teams have been very good defensively wherever he's gone to. I'm honestly surprised I didn't have him higher. As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why, for me, Derek, I have him at number 2, is because of the proven track record, number 1. Like, places he goes, he succeeds. I mean, the defense is usually a highlight when he is there, right? And even if he's not always given the most talent to work with, he is a great teacher. I mean, and obviously, Derek, the Colts brought him in, and obviously they feel very highly about him because they brought him in when they were going through their head coaching cycle, and he was one of the finalists. He was one of those guys they were seriously considering. So to get him on your staff, to get another guy that was in your top picks on your staff, to me, makes a lot of sense. And Derek, on top of him just being a teacher, having success, being a very blitz-heavy guy, which I think is just going to be a breath of fresh air for what the Colts have had under Gus Bradley and really even Matt Eberflus, if you go to that. It's going to be a lot more aggressive. And I think, Derek, that if you bring in Wink Martindale, I think that could lead to even more changes on the defense, which I think is kind of necessary in certain ways. And honestly, Derek, a complete culture shift, in my opinion. Like, he is a guy that strikes me as very Bruce Arians-esque. He's not going to put up with BS. He's a great teacher. And I just think he's a guy, Derek, that, you talk about some of the lack of accountability. That's not going to fly with Wink Martindale. I'm not saying it's going to fly with any of these other guys, but he is a guy that I just get this sense he's not going to put up with that, and he's going to squash that at the first opportunity, right? And I think that's going to lead to the defense just overall playing with so much more juice, playing with so much more energy. I mean, we raved about Matt Eberflus and how hard the defense played. I mean, this guy, Derek, he's teaching the fundamentals, which clearly the Colts need because they led the league in missed tackles a year ago. And he's going to bring a hard-nosed edge that I honestly think this defense has been lacking greatly over the past really half a decade, if not longer. I really do feel that way. So for me, it's like I want a guy that is not going to be afraid to blitz, is not going to be afraid to be aggressive. Yeah, it's not always going to work out. But, Derek, I want an attacking guy. And I think out of all these candidates, Wink Martindale is probably the most attacking guy. And to me, it's just that accountability is so important. And you just haven't had that on the defensive side of the ball. And Wink strikes me as a guy that's going to get in guys' faces if it needs to happen. And frankly, I think that's what you need. So that's why I have him so high and above some of these other guys. Again, I think all of these guys deserve a fair look. I really do. And all 4 of the top guys we talked about, I really do believe as well, Derek, are some guys that I would be perfectly fine with if the Colts went after. But Wink's just so different from every other guy on this list, which is why it's so enticing to me. Because it's like, I think you almost need different on your defense. I really think you do. But I think the reason also, Derek, why I only have him at number 2 is because, yes, you'll have a shift there, but also when it comes to schematic stuff, like it might be a little bit more work if you bring him in, to have to, get rid of and acquire players, which some people, they might be fine with that. But there are some players here that might be gone, I think, if Wink does come more than some of these other guys. And I could be wrong on that, but I kind of could get that sense a little bit more. Some guys that maybe we aren't ready to part with yet, but maybe not. But what is your number 2, Derek? Who comes in at number 2 for you then?
Yep, I had Lou Anarumo over here at number 2. Has spent the last 5 years with the Cincinnati Bengals. I think 2 things went into this, Cody. A lot more of it having to do with the defensive backs background here. Because again, he was a defensive backs coach for, basically 3-4 other places prior to getting the defensive coordinator position with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that in part has to do with it. And, again, Cody, I hear what you're saying. The 2024 Cincinnati Bengals, horrific. I don't know. I mean, I would say that's in part having to do with Lou. Part of it is not. Again, they got rid of a lot of the defensive pieces that helped make the rest of that defense really good. Again, Trey Hendrickson, he's unbelievable. And no doubt, I mean, he's a one-man wrecking crew. But that's really all he is. He's just a one-man wrecking crew. Nobody else over there really has, developed themselves into what they've wanted to become. And obviously, they didn't have quite the whole collection of talent that they had from the last time they went to the Super Bowl, which we all know, again, the defense for the Cincinnati Bengals was the primary reason as to why they got to the playoffs and why they got to the Super Bowl in the first place, because that was a defense led by Lou that was able to make it to that spot. They know what it is. They know that they had to get better talent around that. So number 2 for Lou, for me, again, him, Wink Martindale, they do have a lot going for them. And again, it's nice to see that the Indianapolis Colts are taking such likeness to those guys. And I do see your point with the number 2 thing with Wink, because of the fact he had 2 interviews with the Indianapolis Colts a few seasons ago about the head coaching job here in Indianapolis. So, there's understanding between him and Ballard there.
Yeah, and I don't know. It would be so refreshing to me to have a no BS type of guy. I mean, I feel like you've just had that, and it's been so inexcusable the last couple of years. So it'd just be a breath of fresh air to me. But I understand Wink turned some people off. I understand that, but to me, it's just like I welcome that change because it can't get much worse than it was a year ago. So if you're gonna blow it up, blow it up. But I understand some people don't like that. But Derek, I think unanimously the number 1 for both of us is Dennis Allen. Obviously was the head coach for the Saints for the last couple of years, did get fired. But prior to that, Derek was the defensive coordinator of the Saints. He's been a couple different spots. He's had some really good defenses. So explain to me in your mind why Dennis Allen.
Yeah, so Dennis Allen, number 1, because like you said before, take the head coaching stuff out of it. That's neither here nor there. Let's not forget, they promoted this guy for a couple reasons, mainly due to the fact that the last 2 seasons that he was the defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, his defense was a top 10 defense. I mean, they were top 10 in practically every category, which again just goes to show you just how powerful he was. Because originally, when he took the job with the Saints, he wasn't that good. His defenses were near the bottom of the league, Cody, when he first took over. And then that first year he was bad. Second year, it was still bad, but it got better. And then the next year, it got a little bit better then. And then that 4th or 5th year, it took off. And then all of a sudden, it was the Saints defense, one of the best defenses in the league. And Lord knows if they had a better offense, than the New Orleans Saints would have had something to go with there. So, Dennis Allen, he goes to show you, he's got that defensive back experience. And then also as a defensive coordinator, not only was a defensive coordinator for a long period of time, was a very good defensive coordinator when he left it. So that is probably why, in a lot of people's minds, as of this moment, Dennis Allen should be the favorite to get the job.
I think a couple different things. You pointed it out well. When he took the coordinator position in 2016, the defense really was not great that year in his first year, but you kind of saw, like you said, that drastic improvement. I mean, 2017, 17th in yards allowed, 10th in points allowed. 2018, 14th in yards allowed, 14th in points allowed. 2019, 11th in yards allowed, 13th in points allowed. 2020, 4th in yards allowed, 5th in points allowed. And then 2021, when his last year as a defensive coordinator, 7th in yards allowed and 4th in points allowed. So, Derek, that totally makes sense. I think out of all these candidates, he definitely has the most impressive recent resume as a defensive coordinator. I said it earlier with Steve Wilkes, but some guys are just coordinators. I mean, they're not great head coaches, but they are great coordinators. And Dennis Allen is the definition of a great coordinator. And I think also a part of the reason why I have him ahead of a guy like Wink Martindale is, yeah, he may not be as much of the old school get in your face type of guy, but Dennis Allen's no slouch, Derek. I mean, He does run that 4-3, so it would be a very similar scheme to what the Colts currently run, but it wouldn't be any of the same sort of mindset. It wouldn't be any of that sort of, react sort of stuff. The identity of the Colts defense would certainly change in a lot of different ways. I mean, he is so much more aggressive than Gus Bradley would be, Derek. And, he makes, and he's known for doing this, for making life on the quarterback very difficult. And Derek, Colts fans should welcome that change, because after seeing what the quarterbacks, not even like good quarterbacks, what backup quarterbacks have done to this defense over the last number of years, I mean, this would be a welcome change. And, every single year, pretty much his defense got better with the New Orleans Saints. So, yeah, he definitely would be a guy that I would absolutely love to bring in here in so many ways. I think it would be such a massive upgrade. And just like with if you brought in Wink, it would be such a breath of fresh air for this defense. I mean, he's a guy that, yeah, okay, maybe first year, Derek, it's not a top 5 unit, but he has a history of showing and a track record of showing that given time, his defense can and will get better. And I think you got to point to the coaching there. Obviously, acquiring personnel is huge too. But, I mean, you saw what the Saints did. Even when their offense kind of went through a bunch of crap, I mean, the Saints defense was consistently one of the better ones in the NFL under Dennis Allen. And a reason why the Saints were even relevant at all after Drew Brees retired. So, yeah, man, absolutely would love to have him in here. Like I said, I think any of these top 4 guys I'd be pretty content with. But I think all of them have their pluses, have their minuses. But I go off of previous track record and just the type of defense he'd bring in. And I just think, honestly, Dennis Allen, to me, is the clear-cut number 1. Any thoughts here on Dennis Allen? I haven't let you say a whole lot about him, but any thoughts about Dennis Allen that maybe I didn't throw out there that you want to talk about?
Nah, man. I mean, like I said before, just a guy that, has shown that if you give him enough time and you put the right pieces in order, that, this is a guy that can take it to where you need to go. And, I think that that's going to be the tough part for Colts Nation, right? Is to, be patient with whatever defensive coordinator we bring in, because Lord knows that's not in the repertoire. Colts fans right now, we've been told to be patient for a long time, and things haven't gotten better. But you're right, Cody. I mean, it is whatever DC we bring in, it's not going to automatically change overnight. It's not going to. You got to get the right pieces in there. And you certainly hope that whichever DC they do bring in is going to have the right mindset and have the right understanding to help Ballard and whoever else is going to be helping with the drafting process to, be able to give them the right pieces and say, hey, these are guys that I need on this defense, to be able to make this defense to what you guys want it to be.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because you've invested so much in your defensive line. And I'm just curious, Derek, how much your defensive line wasn't able to show because it was so easy for opposing quarterbacks to 1, 2, 3 throw it, and so you couldn't get that pressure. I know you look at the sack numbers, you look at this and all that stuff, and I don't think the defensive line was like terrific, but I do think you look at that, and then sometimes the numbers can be skewed a little bit because, I mean, there just is no resistance. And if you brought in a guy like a Dennis Allen, there would be more of that. And I think you can get more of a true evaluation on the current state of your D-line and also some of the young players in your secondary, Jalen Jones, if you bring back Samuel Womack and, guys like Nick Cross, for example. And obviously I expect a big overhaul here. But Dennis Allen also being a former secondary coach as well, I think is going to go a long way. And, I mean, Derek, you've swung a lot at DBs and not been able to find anybody who can properly develop them yet. So I'll be definitely interested from those standpoints and get maybe more of a true evaluation with an actual legitimate scheme that's proven it can work in the modern NFL. So that's going to be interesting to me there if the Colts do bring in him. Like how much of an evaluation, like how much of it, Derek, I'll throw this out here to you. And if you don't really know, that's totally fine. But like, I wonder how much of what the defense didn't do a year ago, what's the balance between lack of like talent and personnel versus just an awful scheme? Like, where is the balance there? I do wonder a little bit. And I do think getting in a legitimate, proven DC would do wonders for answering that question.
You definitely want to bring somebody in that understands what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And you're right. Like, it's about finding that balance of, you don't want it to become a defensive coordinator is the issue. You want it to become, okay, so the defensive coordinator knows what he's doing with these players, but it's the players that are holding back the potential for this defense. So now we need to try to find the better players to get on the field so that our defense coordinator is able to do his job the way that we need him to. So you're right. Like, we said that in the early part of the days when it came to Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley, we said it. The defense has not been great in the last few years. And, the personnel decisions by Chris Ballard and some others haven't always necessarily been the best. And we gave Gus Bradley the benefit of the doubt on that one. But again, it came down to the fact that so many occasions the defense just failed to show up. And that's the problem, is we're trying to see a common trend where we're trying to see to where the defense commonly does show up, or the defense doesn't show up in the same area at the same place every time. If that's the case, then we know that there's something wrong with that particular part of the defense, and that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and I think you said it right. Like, it wasn't just one part of the defense that was so evidently bad. It was every single part of the defense. Like, one week it'd be allowing Josh Jacobs to run for over 200 yards. The next week it would be allowing a backup quarterback to do whatever he wants against you. It would just be consistently bad on some sort of level. I mean, the consistently bad was definitely the missed tackles, but it was just the fundamental things, right? And I'm not saying don't bring in any talent, because I definitely think you need to bring in talent on this defense, a lot of talent. But I do think it will be interesting to see what does happen when you actually bring in a guy who knows what he's doing a little bit and has proven. And then, like you said, you can get a better tell on, okay, what is the areas of this defense that are truly deficient? What do we need to put all of our effort into improving, moving forward, right? And then you can get a clear evaluation, because just this scheme, yeah, there was certainly some personnel issues, but I mean, the scheme was just awful. It was just terrible. And the accountability obviously wasn't there. There was a lot of issues with the defense, but I don't know. All that to say, I am very much looking forward to seeing if they do bring anybody else in. And I do hope they hire one of the top candidates to get a better feel for this defense. And man, I guess we'll have to see when it comes to that. But guys, let us know your thoughts here on these 5 candidates for defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. Any guys that you would prefer as your top candidate? Any guys you're like, absolutely not, I would want the Colts to stay away from them in terms of that? Let us know all those things in the comments down below. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.